Mr. Landry,
Sure.
you're up next for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Feinberg, I want to go back and just clarify a couple of things. I know this isn't directly your responsibility, but going back to the moratorium fund, that fund has now been closed off. Is that correct? Do you have no?
Until I heard this morning the representation that it was closed off, I didn't know it was closed off. I doubt that it's closed off, but I don't know. I have enough problems of my own with the GCCF.
Well, I know, but the problem I'm having is that actually, see, to me, it concerns me because I believe that oil and gas companies, along with our fishermen and everyone else, the moratorium was a direct impact from the spill. You see, all right? And so there are a lot of businesses, both directly tied to the oil and gas industry or indirectly tied to the oil and gas industry, who have been impacted that were impacted by the moratorium, and I'm concerned that they're not getting paid as well. I visited recently. I visited an oil and gas supply company. Their business was down 75%, and yet when they sent their information over, all of their accounting information, they were denied. And of course that folds into or dovetails into what I think is another problem that I think Mr. Bonner had alluded to, is that I'm hearing across the Gulf Coast from people who have applied to your fund that when they check in, when a claimant checks in and says, you know, where are we? They'll say, listen, we lost some paperwork. Could you resubmit this? Could you resend this to us? And what I'm telling you, Mr. Feinberg, is it's just too coincidental that the person in Houma, Louisiana is having the same problem as the person in Mobile or the person in Pensacola when it comes to the GCCF losing their paperwork. I mean, it just doesn't happen that coincidental. Now, I know that you have set up in Louisiana the Long Law Firm to assist people in trying to put their paperwork together, and I think that has helped as well. But it just seems like the process is taking way too long.
3 answers. 1, there's no misunderstanding here. I share your concern about the moratorium claims. I wish I could pay those claims. I have no jurisdiction over those claims from day one. You are preaching to the choir. I think I've got 1,600 claims, Congressman, that I would like to pay, and I can't.
Well, do you move those over to the other fund?
I move them over to the other fund, but the other fund, as far as I can tell, has shown no inclination in paying these claims because they're not rig worker claims, or as Congressman Holt pointed out an hour ago, even if the moratorium fund will pay some of those claims, as he cited some statistics, they haven't broadened it sufficiently.
Okay.
So I'm sharing that view. Okay. Second, we're not losing any paper. Now, when we started, Congressman Landry, when we took over for BP last summer into the early fall, paying the emergency payments, transitioning from BP paying the claims over to the GCCF taking over, then we did. Well, but the idea that we've processed 95% of the claims, over 1 million claims, the idea that we're losing paper, I just don't buy that either.
Well, I tell you what would, I mean, look, I don't believe people down in the district are being disingenuous as well. Now, of course, I've seen a lot of times where what we're being told up in Washington and maybe what you're being told up in Boston is different from what exactly goes on to the ground. So, I would, Mr. Chairman, I would just put in a request that we look for, and both with Mr. Holt and with Mr. Markey and Chairman Hastings, that we try to look to maybe doing a field hearing down somewhere in between. Maybe we go down to Biloxi. We'll split the difference between Florida and Louisiana. And Mr. Feinberg, if you'd be so grateful as to come with it, and we could hear directly from, before we put you up, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt, we'll put them up to the table, and then we'll listen to them, and then we'll bring you on, and then somewhere in the middle, I guess we'll find what the truth is.
I've received, since we took over last August, 60 million pieces of paper. It's conceivable. I would suggest, Congressman, if there are particular constituents who claim lost document, you just get me their name and their claim number. I will personally get back to you with a status report on those claimants who claim lost documentation. The other thing I just want to mention before you depart, I checked during the break, and I have an answer for you. If somebody files their claim with the GCCF, they're protected by the federal statute of limitations.
Thank you so much.
That was a very good question.
Yeah, thank you. That's important. Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.